At 7:42 a.m. on August 17th, 1943, Technical Sergeant James McKenna crouched beneath the left wing of a P-38 Lightning at Doba Dura Airfield in New Guinea. Engines were rumbling, mechanics shouted over prop wash, and sweat cut through the red dust on his face. He looked up at Lieutenant Robert Hayes climbing into the cockpit, 23 years old, 6 missions, no kills, and thought, he's not coming back. That morning would become the answer to a question nobody had asked yet: how one mechanic's stupid wire trick made P-38s outturn the Zero and change the air war over the Pacific. The Japanese were sending 18 Mitsubishi A6M0s to intercept the patrol. Hayes would be flying straight into them. McKenna had kept Lightnings flying for 8 months. He knew every inch of their twin-boom design: 2 Allisons, a 20mm cannon, 4 50s, and the kind of straight-line speed that scared anything with a red sun on its wings. But speed wasn't the problem. Turning was. The Zero could loop inside a P-38 like a dancer dodging a truck. Half the turning radius, half the roll time. Every manual screamed the same warning: never turn with a Zero. Dive, fire, climb, escape, hit-and-run warfare in the clouds. The doctrine was perfect until combat started. Hayes had followed the book 5 times. 5 times the Zeros baited him into a turn, reversed tighter, got on his tail, and tore his wingman to shreds. The 5th Air Force had lost 37 Lightnings in 6 weeks. Command said it was pilot error. McKenna said it was physics. He'd seen what the manuals didn't. A slack in the control cables? Not much. 3/8 of an inch, but enough to make the ailerons hesitate. At 400 miles an hour, you never felt it. At 180, in a turning fight, that hesitation was death. McKenna had reported it. The engineering officer waved a form. Within factory tolerance. Lockheed was 7,000 miles away. Paperwork wouldn't save anyone. So McKenna broke the rules. He cut 6 inches of piano wire from a wrecked Lightning, bent it into a crude Z shape, and spliced it into Hayes's left aileron cable. 8 minutes of work, 0.4 pounds of extra tension, slack gone, no authorization, no paperwork, no witness. He wiped the blood from a small cut on his thumb and closed the access panel. When Hayes taxied out, McKenna just watched him disappear into the blue, and waited. 3 weeks earlier, he'd watched another pilot die. Lieutenant David Chen, 3 missions in, had come home once with bullet holes stitched across his boom and a story about sluggish controls. 2 weeks later, flying a different Lightning, Chen was shot down over Rabaul. Same complaint, same outcome. Pilot error, the report said. Captain William Morrison, 11 kills, flight leader, gone on August 3rd, radioed that his controls felt mushy just before his P-38 spiraled into the jungle. Another pilot error. McKenna and his friend Rodriguez stopped believing the reports. They could hear the problem when they plucked the cables during maintenance, the dull twang of loosened tension. Within spec didn't mean safe. Every morning smelled the same: fuel, hot oil, and the iron-sweet stench of men who wouldn't see sundown. McKenna signed off logs knowing the planes were death traps built to tolerance instead of survival. Regulations said he couldn't touch the flight control system. Conscience said otherwise. August 16th, 1943. Hayes found him alone in the hangar, sweat running down his temples. "Jim, is there anything at all that can make her roll faster?" McKenna looked at the kid. The fear behind the question was louder than the generators outside. He told Hayes to come back at dawn. Then he waited until everyone was asleep. He opened the inspection panel. The metal still held the day's heat. Inside, the cable sagged like a heartbeat waiting to stop. He slid in the wire, his hands cramped and bleeding, forcing the clevis pin through until it seated. He tested it. No slack. The aileron responded instantly. Perfect. At 1:15 a.m., he left the hangar. The jungle was black and humming with insects. Every sound felt like a witness. If the mod failed, he'd hang for it. But if it worked, maybe one man would live. Dawn. Hayes strapped in, engines roaring. McKenna stood with his clipboard and said nothing. At 8:14, they met the Zeros over Huon Gulf. 4 P-38s dove from altitude. Hayes picked a target and went in at 380 miles an hour. The Zero broke right. Hayes rolled to follow, and the Lightning snapped into position. No delay, no drag. It moved like an extension of his hands. The Zero filled the gun sight. Hayes fired. The tracers walked up the fuselage, through the cockpit, out the other side. The Zero exploded. His wingman shouted. 3 more Zeros diving. Hayes shoved the throttles forward, started to climb, then stopped himself. Doctrine said, run. Instinct said, fight. He rolled left and pulled. The Lightning came around faster than any P-38 he'd ever flown. The lead Zero overshot. Hayes fired again. Another kill. The next 2 tried to scissor. Hayes reversed. Immediate response. One pilot blinked at the impossible speed, lost his timing, bled too much energy. Hayes got inside the turn, fired from 200 feet. Third kill. The last Zero broke off and fled. 7 minutes, 3 victories, 0 damage. When Hayes landed at 9:03, McKenna was there. Hayes climbed out, drenched in sweat, hands shaking. It worked, he said. Nothing else. Word spread faster than official memos ever could. Captain Frank Mitchell had watched the fight from 15,000 feet. He'd seen Hayes's P-38 snap through turns like a different airplane. After landing, he cornered McKenna. "What did you do to that plane?" McKenna hesitated, then told him. "The wire, the tension, the risk." Mitchell didn't blink. "Do mine." That night, McKenna did. By sunrise, Mitchell's Lightning had the same hidden secret. He flew it the next morning and came back grinning like a man who'd cheated death. "Feels like a fighter, not a freight truck," he told his crew chief. Within days, 9 Lightnings at Dobadura carried the stupid wire trick. Pilots whispered about it in the ready room. Mechanics passed around spare piano wire like contraband. They installed it, removed it for inspection, reinstalled it after. No orders, no signatures, just trust between men who understood survival. By August 20th, the modification had crossed squadrons. Mechanics at Goosap and Port Moresby were cutting wire, bending Z-shapes, and pretending they hadn't. The results were undeniable. Lieutenant Hayes scored 2 more kills on August 22nd. Mitchell bagged 3 on the 25th. Pilots who'd gone months without a single victory were coming home with smoking gun barrels. In July, the kill ratio had been 2 P-38s lost for every Zero destroyed. By September, it was even. Something had shifted. The Japanese noticed first. Reports from the 11th Air Fleet described P-38s rolling and reversing with unexpected quickness. Pilots who'd mastered the timing of the American fighters found themselves overshooting, misjudging. For 2 years, the Zero's supremacy in turning combat had been unchallenged. Now it was evaporating. Even Saburo Sakai, Japan's celebrated ace, felt it. On September 3rd, he tried his signature reversal against a Lightning over Wewak. He expected the usual delay, the heartbeat between the P-38's stick input and its roll. It wasn't there. The American's plane matched him turn for turn. Sakai dove away, shaken. For the first time, the Zero had been outmaneuvered. Japanese intelligence tore through wreckage from downed P-38s, searching for the difference. None found it. The change was hidden deep inside the boom, 6 inches of bent piano wire indistinguishable from factory fittings. By mid-September, the numbers told the story. 38 Japanese fighters down, 22 P-38s lost. For the first time in the Pacific, the Lightning was holding its own. The effect went beyond tactics. Confidence, the invisible fuel of air combat, shifted sides. American pilots who'd entered fights expecting to die were now hunting. Japanese aces who'd once taunted them into turns now hesitated. The hunter had become the hunted. No one in command knew why. They saw results, but not causes. Squadron records listed maintenance adjustments without detail. Inspectors measured proper tension because the mechanics removed the wire before checks. The secret lived in grease-stained hands, not paperwork. By late September, the whispered modification reached nearly 40 P-38s across New Guinea. The transformation was total. Pilots stopped fearing turning fights. They started winning them. The official world caught up in October. An inspector at Doba Dura noticed inconsistent readings in cable tension logs and pulled a panel from a lightning. There it was, a piece of piano wire, bent like a Z, humming with strain. He filed a report. It climbed the chain of command until it landed on an engineering desk in Brisbane. The reaction was predictable. Outrage first, unauthorized modification of flight controls, violation of safety standards, potential court-martials. Then came the data, kill ratios, combat reports, pilot testimonials, and silence. Regulations said, punish the mechanic. Reality said, he'd just saved the Pacific. In November, Lockheed engineers arrived from California. They studied McKenna's trick, ran stress tests, simulated loads. Their verdict, the wire added negligible risk and solved a genuine control lag issue. Quietly, without fanfare, Lockheed integrated a permanent tensioning system into the new P-38J model. Official reports credited engineering refinements. No mention of a tired sergeant bleeding over a cable in a New Guinea hangar. Hayes kept flying. 63 missions, 11 kills, and a life that would have ended before his 24th birthday without that midnight modification. He went home to Iowa, married his high school sweetheart, and spent nearly 4 decades dusting crops instead of dodging bullets. Every August 17th, he called McKenna. 2 words, thank you. Mitchell survived too, ending the war with 16 victories and a lesson he repeated for the rest of his career. Never underestimate the mechanic who knows the machine better than the manual. McKenna finished his service in 1946, opened a garage in Long Beach, and spent 40 years fixing cars instead of fighters. He never told the story publicly. When asked about the war, he just said, I fixed airplanes. Decades later, in 1991, a military historian tracing P-38 field modifications found a note in a forgotten maintenance log, unofficial cable tension device installed. Pilot reports improved roll. He followed the trail to a 73-year-old mechanic still turning wrenches in California. McKenna told him the truth. It wasn't anything special, just something that needed doing. The historian estimated the modification saved between 80 and 100 American lives. McKenna shrugged. I just remember the ones who came back. When he died in 2006 at 88, his obituary mentioned World War II service. It didn't mention the wire. But in a small garage in Long Beach, a faded photograph still hangs on the wall, a young man in coveralls standing beside a P-38 Lightning. On the back, in grease-smeared handwriting, August 1943, New Guinea. That's how innovation really happens in war. Not in conference rooms or engineering committees, but in midnight hangars by men who see the flaw and refuse to wait for permission to fix it. Because sometimes saving a squadron and rewriting the balance of air combat starts with one mechanic, one rule broken, and one stupid piece of wire.